They erased his name. They buried his truth. But the grave remembered everything. Nobody paid Elijah Booker to clean graves. That was the first thing people never understood. He wasn't employed by the city. He wasn't part of any church program. He didn't post about it online or record himself for sympathy clicks. Every Saturday morning, before the sun burned the fog off the grass, Elijah walked into Old Magnolia Cemetery with a cracked plastic bucket, a stiff brush, and a bottle of soapy water mixed wrong on purpose. Too much soap, not enough water. He said it helped the names shine better. Old Magnolia Cemetery sat behind a row of abandoned shotgun houses on the edge of town, where the pavement gave up and the dirt took over. The city pretended the place didn't exist. So did most people. Especially after the rumors started. Elijah, folks would say when they saw him hauling his bucket, "Why are you always messing with them dead people?" He'd smile politely, nod like he heard them, and keep walking. Truth was, Elijah talked to the graves. Not loud. Not crazy talk. Just quiet greetings. "Morning, Miss Lottie. How you holding up today, Mr. Henry? You still leaning, sir? I'm gonna fix you one day." The stones didn't answer back. Not then. Most of the headstones were cracked, sunken, or split clean in half. Names half-eaten by time. Dates that told stories nobody alive wanted to remember. 1863, 1877, 1919, 1955. Too many short lives. Too many unknowns. Some stones didn't even have names. Just beloved or son or nothing at all. Elijah cleaned them anyway. He had a rule: if the dead were forgotten, he'd remember them. If their names were gone, he'd polish the stone until the absence itself looked intentional. It started after his grandmother died. She'd been buried in a proper cemetery across town with trimmed hedges and security cameras. But the first time Elijah visited, he noticed something that stayed stuck in his chest. Every grave around hers was spotless. Every name legible. Every flower fake but perfectly arranged. It felt wrong. Later that week, he wandered into Old Magnolia by accident while trying to take a shortcut home. The place smelled like wet leaves and rusted iron. The silence was heavier there. Like the air was holding its breath. His grandmother had once told him, laughing softly, "Baby, if you want to know the truth about this country, look at where they bury us." Standing among the neglected stones, Elijah finally understood what she meant. So he came back. And back again. People thought he was odd. Some thought he was touched. One man at the liquor store called him Graveyard Jesus and laughed so hard he spilled his change. Elijah laughed too, mostly because it was easier than explaining. Besides, humor helped when your only audience was the dead. That Saturday evening, the sky bruised purple faster than usual. Thunder rolled far away, lazy and distant, like it was deciding whether the effort was worth it. Elijah stayed late. He always did when the cemetery felt restless. He couldn't explain that feeling. Just a tightness behind the ribs. Like being watched, but not in a threatening way. More like anticipation. He worked row by row, humming an off-key gospel tune his grandmother used to sing while frying fish. His brush scraped softly over stone, lifting decades of grime. Soap ran down dates older than any living memory. Then he reached the grave at the very back. He'd never cleaned this one before. The headstone was darker than the others, almost black, though it was made of the same cheap grey granite. No flowers. No offerings. The ground around it looked unsettled. Like it had been disturbed and then smoothed over badly. The name carved into it made his hand pause mid-scrub. Isaiah Booker. 1891 to 1921. Elijah frowned. Booker wasn't exactly rare, but it wasn't common either. His chest warmed with an unfamiliar discomfort. "Funny," he muttered. "Same last name." He knelt, poured water over the stone, and scrubbed gently. That's when it happened. At first, he thought it was rust. A dark streak slid down from the carved letters, thin and slow, soaking into the soap suds. Elijah leaned closer, squinting. The streak was red. Too red. The brush slipped from his hand. More liquid seeped from the stone, pooling at the base. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just steady. like a wound that had waited a century to reopen. Elijah stumbled backward, heart slamming against his ribs. "That ain't funny," he whispered, voice cracking. The ground beneath the headstone trembled. And then, beneath the distant thunder, Elijah heard something else. A sound that didn't come from the sky. A low, broken sob, muffled, strained, rising from the earth itself. The grave was crying. Elijah froze, breath caught halfway in his chest, staring at the bleeding stone as the sob deepened into a voice trying to remember how to speak. And somewhere deep in his bones, Elijah knew this wasn't about coincidence. This was about blood. And history had finally decided it was tired of being quiet. Elijah ran. He didn't scream. He didn't pray. He just ran. His boots slipped on wet grass as he stumbled through the crooked rows of stones. The sobbing followed him, not loud, not chasing, but heavy, like a truth that didn't need legs to catch you. He didn't look back. His heart beat so hard it hurt his ears. By the time he burst out of Old Magnolia Cemetery, his lungs were burning and his hands were shaking. He didn't stop until he reached his small apartment 2 streets away. Inside, he slammed the door, locked it, then leaned against it as if the grave might knock. Silence. Too much of it. Elijah slid down to the floor and pressed his hands over his face. His palms smelled like soap, dirt, and something metallic he didn't want to name. "That wasn't real," he said aloud. His voice sounded thin. Unconvincing. He stood up fast, turned on every light, and went straight to the bathroom sink. He washed his hands 3 times. Then 4. The water ran clear, but the feeling stayed. That night, sleep refused him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the name. Isaiah Booker. He tried to laugh it off. Same last name didn't mean anything. Plenty of Bookers lived in the county. Still, the date stuck with him. Died at 30. Young. Too young for natural causes back then, especially for a black man in 1921. Around 3 a.m., he gave up and opened his grandmother's old wooden trunk. He hadn't touched it since the funeral. Inside were photo albums, folded letters, church programs, and documents yellowed with age. Elijah flipped through slowly, careful not to tear anything. Near the bottom, he found a brittle family tree written in his grandmother's neat handwriting. His finger traced names. Then it stopped. Isaiah Booker, brother. Elijah's mouth went dry. "Brother," he whispered. His grandmother had never mentioned a brother. She barely talked about her parents at all. She used to say, "Some stories don't age well, baby." Elijah sat on the floor until the sun came up, staring at the name. When morning arrived, it didn't bring peace. It brought questions. He took the day off work and went to the county records office. The building smelled like dust and stale coffee. A tired woman at the desk glanced at him over her glasses. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for a death record," Elijah said. "From 1921. She sighed. "You know how old that is?" "Yes, She pointed him toward a back room filled with filing cabinets that looked like they had survived at least 1 fire and 2 floods. Elijah searched for hours. Isaiah Booker showed up fast. Too fast. The record was thin. No cause of death listed. No doctor's signature. Just a stamp in red ink. Closed. That was unusual. Even back then, something was usually written. Elijah felt the same tight feeling he'd felt at the grave. "Excuse me," he said to the woman at the desk. "Why would a file be closed like this?" She looked at the page, then at him. Her face changed. "I can't help you with that," she said quickly, sliding the file back. "Some records are restricted." "Restricted by who?" She lowered her voice. "By people who are still important." That answer stayed with him as he left. On his way home, Elijah stopped at Miss Bernice's barbershop. Miss Bernice was 92 and sharper than anyone under 60. If the town had a memory, she was it. She squinted at him through her glasses. "Boy, you look like you saw a ghost." "Maybe I did," Elijah said, sitting down. "Miss Bernice, do you remember someone named Isaiah Booker?" The clippers stopped. The shop went quiet. Miss Bernice stared at him for a long time. Then she shook her head slowly. You bookers always circle back, she said. What happened to him? Elijah asked. She leaned closer. You sure you want that answer? Elijah thought of the crying grave. Yes, Miss Bernice sighed. They said Isaiah talked too much, she said. About land. About votes. About bodies buried where they shouldn't be. He was young. Smart. And that scared folks. Who is folks? Elijah asked. She met his eyes. The kind that don't like history remembered. Elijah swallowed. That night, as he lay in bed, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. One message. Stop cleaning that grave. Elijah sat up, heart pounding. From outside his window, far away but clear, he heard it again. A low sob. Calling his name. Elijah. The dead knew who he was now. And they were not done speaking. Elijah did not go back to the cemetery the next day. That fact bothered him more than the crying grave. He tried to act normal. He went to work. He answered emails. He laughed at a joke that wasn't funny. But everything felt thin, like paper stretched too tight. By evening, the guilt crept in. He had made a promise once, out loud, to stones that couldn't answer, that he would not abandon them. Now one of them had spoken, and he had run. That sat heavy on his chest. So after dinner, Elijah grabbed his jacket and keys. Just to look, he told himself. Nothing else. Old Magnolia looked different at night. The moon hung low, pale and nervous. The trees leaned inward like they were listening. Elijah walked slowly, every step loud in his ears. He held his phone like a weak flashlight, its beam cutting narrow paths through the dark. The crying did not start right away. That was worse. When he reached the back row, he stopped. Isaiah Booker's grave was clean. Too clean. The soap stains were gone. The ground looked packed tight, smooth like someone had pressed it down carefully. Elijah knelt and touched the stone. It was dry. Okay, he whispered. This is where you tell me I imagined everything. The air grew cold. Not the weather kind. The kind that crawls under your skin. Then the voice came again, clear this time. They took my name. Elijah fell back onto the grass. I didn't mean to, he started. You hear me now, the voice said. It sounded tired. Old. Not angry. That is enough. Elijah swallowed hard. Why me? There was a pause. Because you still look, the voice said. Most folks walk past. Elijah sat up slowly. What happened to you? The stone darkened again, but this time no blood flowed. Instead, pictures filled Elijah's mind. Not like dreams. Like memories forced open. Isaiah as a boy, barefoot, reading by lamplight. Isaiah as a man, standing in front of a group, holding papers. Deeds. Maps. Names. Isaiah being followed. Watched. Warned. Isaiah dragged into the woods, his mouth bleeding, his hands tied. Elijah gasped. They said I was stirring trouble, Isaiah's voice said. Truth does that. Elijah shook his head. Why bury you here? Why hide you? Because I counted, Isaiah replied. I counted land stolen. Votes stolen. Lives stolen. I wrote it down. Elijah's stomach turned. Where are the records? Taken, Isaiah said. Burned. Or locked away. But not all. The ground beneath the grave shifted slightly. Some were hidden, Isaiah continued. Under the church that no longer stands. Elijah frowned. The old Zion church. Yes. Elijah knew the place. Or what was left of it. A cracked foundation behind the highway, fenced off and forgotten. Why are you telling me this now? Elijah asked. Because they are trying to erase even the grave, Isaiah said. Soon there will be nothing left to clean. Elijah thought of the text message. Stop cleaning that grave. Someone's watching, Elijah said. Isaiah's voice softened. They always were. A strange laugh escaped Elijah's mouth. Short. Nervous. You know, most people my age worry about rent and bad bosses. not angry ghosts. For my time, Isaiah said, we worried about being found in ditches. Elijah winced. Fair point. The humor faded quickly. What do you want me to do? Elijah asked. The ground stilled. Remember me, Isaiah said. And show them what they buried. The air warmed. The pressure lifted. Elijah realized he was crying. When he looked up, the cemetery was silent again. Just stones. Just night. He stood slowly, legs weak, and took out his phone. He opened the Notes app and typed one line. Find old Zion. As he turned to leave, he noticed something new at the edge of Isaiah's grave. A small metal object pushed up through the dirt. Elijah knelt and brushed the soil away. It was a rusted key. And engraved on it was a symbol he had seen before. On his grandmother's trunk. Elijah did not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the key. Small. Rusted. Heavy with meaning. By morning, he gave up trying and made coffee strong enough to offend his ancestors. He held the mug with both hands, staring at the steam like it might explain things. His grandmother's trunk sat open on the floor. Elijah knelt and studied the carved symbol again. A circle crossed by 3 short lines. Simple. Quiet. Easy to miss. He pulled out the old church programs, the folded letters, the faded photos. Then he found it. A black and white picture of Old Zion Church. The building stood tall in the photo, solid brick, white steps leading up to heavy wooden doors. People gathered outside, dressed neat, standing close together like they knew they were being watched. On the back of the photo, written in pencil, Zion meeting. Do not lose this. Elijah swallowed. He grabbed his jacket and the key and left. Old Zion sat behind the highway, hidden by weeds and rusted fencing. From the road, it looked like nothing, just broken ground and concrete fragments. The city had put up a sign years ago claiming it was unsafe. Elijah climbed through a bent section of fence and walked toward the foundation. The place felt wrong. Not dangerous. Guarded. He walked slowly, scanning the ground. Near what must have been the old altar, he saw a square slab of concrete slightly darker than the rest. His heart picked up speed. He knelt and brushed away dirt and leaves. There was a metal plate embedded in the slab. A keyhole. Elijah stared at it. Of course, he muttered. Why wouldn't there be a secret basement? He slid the rusted key in. It fit. The lock resisted at first, then turned with a loud click that echoed across the empty land. Elijah froze, waiting to see if anyone would appear. No one did. The slab shifted when he pushed. Under it was a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Elijah pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside. The air below smelled old. Paper. Mold. Dust. The stairs ended in a small room with concrete walls. Shelves lined one side. Boxes filled the other. Elijah's breath caught. This wasn't trash. This was an archive. He opened the nearest box. Inside were ledgers. Handwritten lists. Names. Addresses. Land measurements. Dates. So many dates. He flipped through carefully. Page after page showed transfers of land that didn't make sense. Properties marked seized. Votes marked invalid. Names crossed out in red ink. Black names. Whole families erased with a single line. Elijah's hands trembled. This is it, he whispered. Then he heard footsteps above. Slow. Careful. Elijah killed his phone light instantly. His heart slammed against his ribs as shadows crossed the entrance. A voice spoke above him, low and sharp. Someone's been busy. Elijah held his breath. A flashlight beam swept across the stairs, stopping inches from his face. You shouldn't be here, the man said. Elijah recognized the voice. Councilman Robert Hale. The same man whose name was on the plaque downtown praising community preservation. Elijah forced a smile he didn't feel. Funny. I was about to say the same thing. Hale's eyes flicked to the boxes. His jaw tightened. You don't understand what you're holding, Hale said. I think I do, Elijah replied. And so did Isaiah Booker. The name hit like a slap. Hale's face went pale. You leave this alone, Hale said quietly. Some graves are meant to stay buried. Elijah straightened. Not this one. Behind him, unseen but felt, the air shifted. And for the first time, Elijah realized he was not alone in that room. The air in the basement grew heavy. Not hot. Not cold. Heavy. Elijah felt it press against his back, his shoulders, his chest. Like invisible bodies filling the room, standing close, listening. Councilman Hale felt it too. He stepped back, his confident posture cracking just a little. You feel that? He asked, trying to sound calm. Elijah nodded. Yeah. History. Hale scoffed, but the sound came out thin. You think you're brave. Digging up old wounds. Elijah glanced at the boxes. These aren't wounds. These are crimes. Hale's jaw tightened. Those papers mean nothing without context. They mean names, Elijah said. Land. Votes. People. Hale stepped closer. You release that, you tear this town apart. Elijah laughed once, sharp and bitter. You mean the lie holding it together? The flashlight above flickered. Then another voice joined the room. He speaks plain. Hale froze. What was that? He whispered. Elijah swallowed. You don't hear him. The temperature dropped fast. Hale shook his head, backing toward the stairs. This isn't real. Neither was justice, Isaiah's voice said, calm and clear now. Yet you benefited from its absence. Hale spun around. Who's there? The shelves rattled. Papers shifted as if touched by unseen hands. Elijah's knees felt weak, but he stood his ground. You know Isaiah Booker, Elijah said. You know what he uncovered. Hale's face hardened. That man was a threat. To who? Elijah asked. To order, Hale snapped. To progress. Isaiah laughed softly. That is what they called it then too. The sound made Elijah shiver. Hale's voice dropped. You don't understand the kind of people tied to this. My grandfather. His friends. Banks. Judges. Elijah met his eyes. So you kept doing it. Silence. Hale didn't deny it. You think you're different. Elijah said. You're just better dressed. Hale's hand shook as he reached for his phone. I can make this go away. Isaiah's voice turned firm. You already tried. The ground trembled. A ledger slid off the shelf and hit the floor between them. Hale jumped. Elijah bent down and opened it. The first page showed a familiar symbol, the same one on the key. Below it was a list of names. At the bottom, Isaiah Booker, removed. Elijah's throat tightened. Hale whispered, we did what was necessary. Isaiah answered, you did what was profitable. The room felt crowded now. Elijah could almost see shapes at the edge of his vision. Faces without mouths. Eyes full of patience. They are listening, Isaiah said. All of them. Hale backed up until he hit the stairs. This is insane. Maybe, Elijah said. But it's happening. Hale turned and ran. His footsteps faded above. The pressure lifted slightly, but the presence remained. Elijah exhaled slowly. So, what now? Isaiah's voice softened. Now you choose how loud truth becomes. Elijah looked at the boxes. People will deny it. They always do, Isaiah said. At first. Elijah nodded. I'll need help. You already have it, Isaiah replied. The room warmed. The shadows withdrew. Elijah packed what he could carry, photos, ledgers, letters. Before leaving, he paused. Isaiah, he said. Why me? Really? A gentle pause. Because you clean what others step over, Isaiah said. And because you carry my blood. Elijah closed his eyes. When he opened them, the room was empty. But the truth was finally standing. Elijah did not go home. He drove straight to Miss Bernice's barbershop, even though it was past closing time. The lights were still on. They always were when something important was about to happen. Miss Bernice looked up from her chair when he walked in, boxes of papers in his arms. "I was wondering when you'd stop by," she said calmly. Elijah blinked. "You knew." She smiled without humor. "Baby, when the dead start talking, the living feel it first." They spread the papers across the shop floor. Names. Maps. Old photos. Miss Bernice moved slowly, reading carefully, her hand steady. "They really did it," she murmured. "Stole whole neighborhoods." Elijah nodded. "And buried anyone who noticed." Miss Bernice tapped one ledger. "This won't survive alone." "I know," Elijah said. "That's why I came." She reached for the phone on the wall. "Then we start where truth still has teeth." By morning, copies were made. Photos taken. Files backed up in places that couldn't burn. A local journalist answered Miss Bernice's call. Then another. By noon, the story was everywhere. Not the full truth yet. Just enough. Headlines appeared online. Forgotten records raise questions about historic land theft. Erased names found in old church ruins. The comment sections exploded. Fake. Why dig up the past? My grandfather was a good man. Show the rest. Elijah sat on his couch, watching his phone vibrate non-stop. Then the threats started. Emails. Calls. Messages from unknown numbers. "Delete this. You don't know what you're doing. Last warning." Elijah laughed once. Tired. Originality really is dead. That night, Old Magnolia filled with people. Cameras. Candles. Arguments. Some came to pray. Some came to protest. Some came just to watch. Elijah stood near Isaiah's grave as voices clashed around him. Then someone shouted, "Why is this grave bleeding?" The stone darkened. Red streaks ran again, slow and clear, down the carved name. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted. Isaiah's voice rose, not just in Elijah's head, but in the air itself. "You buried truth alive." People fell silent. You called theft order. You called silence peace. But the ground remembers. Some cried. Some ran. Councilman Hale stood at the edge of the crowd, pale and shaking. Isaiah's voice turned toward him. "You know my name." Hale dropped to his knees. The crowd watched. History was no longer quiet. And it was not done. No one slept in Magnolia that night. Light stayed on in houses that usually went dark by 9. Old arguments resurfaced at kitchen tables. Names long avoided were spoken out loud for the first time in decades. Truth has a sound when it wakes people up. It sounds like fear. Elijah felt it everywhere. He stood near Isaiah's grave as the crowd thinned, watching people leave in silence or anger. Some walked away shaking. Others whispered prayers like they were trying to protect themselves from memory. A woman near the gate cried into her phone. "Mama, our house. The deed says Booker owned it first." Elijah's chest tightened. This was spreading faster than he expected. Isaiah's presence stayed close, heavy but calm. "They are remembering," Isaiah said. "That is always the hardest part." Elijah nodded. "They're scared." "Yes," Isaiah replied. "Because fear asks one question, what did I benefit from?" Across the cemetery, 2 men argued loudly. "My granddaddy worked for what he had." "Then why his name in that ledger?" The argument ended with silence. The most dangerous kind. Elijah felt a cold realization settle in his gut. This wasn't just about justice. It was about identity. People could survive lies, but not mirrors. By morning, the town lines were drawn. Some demanded investigations. Others called it a hoax. A third group stayed quiet, those who recognized family names and felt something rot inside them. Elijah returned home briefly to shower. When he stepped out, his bathroom mirror was fogged, though the water had stopped running. A message appeared slowly, written by nothing he could see. "You cannot clean this away." Elijah staggered back. Isaiah's voice came gently. "That one is not me." Elijah's pulse jumped. "Then who?" "The town," Isaiah said. Guilt has a voice too. That afternoon, Elijah received a call. Councilman Hale was dead. Car crash. Single vehicle. Late night. No witnesses. The town called it tragic. Elijah knew better. Power never falls quietly, it collapses inward. At the crash site, reporters whispered about missing brake lines. About fear in Hale's eyes before impact. Elijah felt no relief. Only weight. Isaiah spoke low. He did not escape. That night, Elijah dreamed. He stood in Old Magnolia, but the graves were open. Inside them were houses, stores, schools. Every stolen thing stacked neatly under the earth. People stood inside the pits, holding deeds and keys they never knew were taken. Then the ground shifted. The graves began to close. Elijah woke gasping. His phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number. We will bury you next. Elijah stared at the screen. Then he smiled, slow and dark. Too late, he whispered. I already dug. Outside, thunder rolled again. Not distant this time. Elijah learned something that week. Being right does not feel good. It feels lonely. People who used to wave now crossed the street when they saw him. Others stared too long, like they were measuring how dangerous he had become. A few whispered his name like it was a warning. Witnesses make people nervous. Elijah returned to Old Magnolia every day anyway. He cleaned more graves. Slower now. Careful. Like each stone carried a confession. Isaiah stayed with him, quiet most of the time. You're tired, Isaiah said one afternoon. Elijah scrubbed harder. I don't get to be. That night, Elijah found his apartment door cracked open. Nothing was missing. That was worse. On his kitchen table lay one of the copied ledgers, open to a page he had not shared publicly. A name was circled in red. Elijah Booker. His stomach dropped. Below it, written in fresh ink. Descendant, unresolved. Elijah sat down slowly. They're tracking blood, he said. Yes, Isaiah replied. Because systems survive by inheritance. Elijah rubbed his face. I didn't ask for this. No, Isaiah said softly. You were born into it. The pressure returned that night, heavier than before. Elijah sensed more than Isaiah now. Many more. They did not speak. They waited. In his dreams, Elijah saw himself scrubbing names off stones instead of cleaning them. Every time he wiped one away, a house appeared behind him. Clean, bright, undeserved. He woke shaking. The next morning, a protest formed downtown. Two sides. One chanting for justice. The other chanting for peace, which sounded a lot like silence. Elijah watched from the edge as police stood between them, hands resting on tools that had always known which side they preferred. A man pointed at Elijah. That's him. Eyes turned. Elijah felt something dark rise inside him, not fear, but clarity. They needed a villain. Isaiah's voice grew firm. This is where many stop. Elijah stepped forward. This isn't about me, he shouted. Look at the names. The crowd surged. Then the ground trembled. Not violently, just enough. Every phone in the crowd buzzed at once. A file released itself online. Every ledger. Every map. Every name. Unstoppable. Miss Bernice's voice echoed in Elijah's head. Truth has teeth. People stared at their screens. Some dropped to their knees. Some screamed. Some ran. Elijah stood still. Isaiah spoke one last time that day. You have done what witnesses do, he said. You made it impossible to unknow. The cemetery wind picked up. And for the first time since this began, Elijah felt something close to peace. Until Isaiah added quietly, but there is still a cost. The cost arrived quietly. No sirens. No crowds. Just absence. Elijah woke up and felt it before he understood it. The air was lighter. Too light. Like a room after someone important leaves and takes the gravity with them. Isaiah, he whispered. Nothing answered. He sat up slowly, heart tightening. For weeks, the voice had been there, steady, guiding, heavy with memory. Now there was only silence. Old Magnolia felt different that morning. Peaceful in a way that made Elijah uneasy. The stones stood clean, names clear, no shadows pressing close. The ground was still. Too still. They're gone, Elijah said to himself. Not erased. Released. News broke before noon. Federal investigators had arrived. Properties frozen. Bank accounts flagged. Judges retired. Foundations renamed. Apologies drafted by people who had never planned to give them. The town looked like it was breathing after being underwater. But Elijah felt hollow. He returned to Isaiah's grave. The stone was dry. Bright. Ordinary. He knelt and placed his palm against it. You said there'd be a cost, he murmured. Is this it? No answer. That night, Elijah dreamed one last time. Isaiah stood across from him, whole and calm. You did well, Isaiah said. You're leaving, Elijah replied. Isaiah nodded. The dead stay loud only until the living listen. Elijah swallowed. I don't know who I am without this. Isaiah smiled gently. You were always more than a witness. Elijah woke with tears on his face. In the weeks that followed, life moved on. The town changed. Slowly. Painfully. Streets were renamed. Graves were restored. Some families gained land back. Others gained only the truth, and had to live with it. Elijah stopped cleaning graves for a while. He needed to remember how to be human again. One evening, Miss Bernice visited him. You okay, baby? She asked. I don't know, Elijah said honestly. She patted his hand. That means you did it right. As she left, Elijah noticed something small on the table. A key. Not rusted. New. And carved into it was the same symbol. Elijah smiled sadly. History, it seemed, was never done with him. Elijah returned to Old Magnolia on a quiet Sunday morning. No cameras this time. No crowds. Just dew on the grass and birds arguing softly in the trees like they always had. The cemetery no longer felt heavy. It felt awake. He carried a small toolbox instead of his usual bucket. Inside were brushes, sealant, and fresh plaques. Not to erase the old stones, but to protect them. Some names deserved to last. Elijah knelt at Isaiah Booker's grave. The stone looked ordinary now. Just a name. 2 dates. No blood. No voices. But Elijah knew better. You did your part, he said quietly. I'll do mine. He stood and walked the rows, greeting the stones like old friends. Morning, Miss Lottie. Still leaning, Mr. Henry. A small smile touched his face. The comedy of it all struck him then, how the town had ignored him for years while he talked to rocks, but panicked the moment the rocks talked back. Humans were strange like that. Weeks passed. Elijah started a foundation. Nothing flashy. Just grants to restore forgotten cemeteries, digitize records, teach kids how to read land deeds and old maps. He taught them one thing above all. History isn't what's written. It's what survives being buried. Sometimes, late at night, Elijah felt that familiar pressure again. Not heavy. Just present. Not voices. Witnesses. The dead did not need him to speak for them anymore. They needed him to remember. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a young boy approached him at the cemetery. Mister, the boy asked, why you clean these? Elijah looked around at the stones, the names, the stories standing quietly in the open air. So they don't disappear, he said. The boy nodded, thinking hard. Who watches them when you're gone? Elijah smiled. They watch each other, he said. As Elijah walked away, the wind passed through the stones, soft and steady. Not crying. Not angry. Just present. And deep beneath the earth, history rested, not buried, but seen. The end. If this story made you pause, if it made you feel something buried rise again, then don't let it end in silence. Tap the like button. It helps stories like this survive. Subscribe, so forgotten voices don't get buried again. And before you go, tell me this in the comments. What country are you listening from? Because history doesn't belong to one place. It belongs to everyone willing to remember.